And we're live. How's it going?
Hey, good.
Hey, good.
Pretty good. Just
For
showered and
those of
stuff.
you, oh, nice. I need to
Okay.
shower. Um, yeah. For those of you tuning in, this is the first time I have streamed on my channel since the CrossFit Games. I actually took pretty much a week off before the CrossFit Games because I wasn't gonna do my normal shows going over the history and other things because I just wanted the focus to be on the actual upcoming games. And then we had the games this past weekend, and of course, um, part of what we're here to talk about today is what transpired at the games, both on Thursday with Lazar, and then the effects lingering after. And it's still pretty early since all that's happened. People are still quite emotional, and so if you don't know, Andy Hurley is with me today. Andy's one of my very good friends, one of my trusted confidants, and pretty much the only person I spoke to in depth about this situation as it was unfolding at the games. Like little background on us, Andy and I typically, I wouldn't say disagree, but we have very different opinions on very different things and all sorts of walks of life. And he's the only person really that I trust to have conversations with that are meaningful, that I know is not then going to judge me for my opinion or my take or my viewpoint. He'll share his, I'll share mine. We go back and forth on different things. And it's like probably I feel like the most healthy conversations I have are with Andy. And so this just made sense. We both have quite a bit of different life experience and both have dealt with tragedy and grief and all kinds of things in different ways. And I guess the biggest thing that I want to do is just like open the floor, have a bit more dialogue with Andy now, and let people who want to comment and ask questions come into it, and just throw stuff out there. And basically my goal is I want to know, what your best tactics are, Andy, for moving forward from a difficult situation. I'm going to share mine. Feel free to share or not share personal stories. And then kind of how you responded to them both emotionally, and then maybe how rationale took over at some point, or maybe your viewpoints changed due to a tragedy completely. Um, and yeah, I guess I'll just dive in and start going into this. Like, um, without a specific instance, like my law enforcement career wasn't all that glamorous, but I think it's the first time in my life, in my early 20s, that I started to see tragedy on a regular basis, like really serious shit. I was very sheltered, and I think a lot of people are sheltered for what actually happens in the real world when you're growing up. Unless you have some incident in your family when you're young, you don't understand what people are dealing with. It's very hard to process emotions. And like, I think my experience there shaped me in the way that I handle and process things. Being a 21, 22-year-old kid dealing with dead bodies after never seeing one in my whole life, dealing with child abuse, dealing with, murder in some cases, like all kinds of loss and grief on a regular basis. And then your job is to learn very quickly how to reel things in emotionally, kind of put your own emotions on the back burners and start to think rationally about situations when the reaction may not be that way. Do you have any experiences where you remember when you were younger that something happened that you had to like change the way you responded? Do you have like an instance when you like respond super emotionally to one thing and then kind of have to shift gears and change a little bit based on either having a realization or growing up a bit? Or do you have anything like that from your past?
I mean, my dad died when I was 5, so I just remember everyone being sad, but not really understanding what was happening. So that's not a case of, I had no real reaction to it besides being sad because my mom was. But I do remember when my uncle died of a brain aneurysm. I don't know, I was 20 something. And that was a moment where I just knew that I can't be sad because he was the uncle I was closest to and the most like me and kinda closest to me. And and closest to my mom. So that was really hard for her. So I wanted to not be emotional and let her be emotional, but be like, a rock for her. I
Well,
guess
how do
that's
you
a
how do you
situation.
how do you process something like that? Like, was your initial reaction to be like overwhelmingly emotional and like you immediately like suck it in, rein it in, have to be tough? Or like, how do you respond to something like that when something hits you hard?
I mean,
It's tough.
I don't know. It's really tough. It was so long ago. I don't remember the exact feelings, but I just remember my mom going up to speak at his funeral and, like fighting back, breaking down. So I knew that if I break down, that's it. And
Do you remember
then
the
doing
do you
it
remember the
on my
funeral?
own.
Do you remember it
Yeah, I
well?
do. That was the first time I saw a dead body because he was open casket. It was very unsettling and I don't know, weird.
The first one I can think of personally, like in my family, was my grandfather. I was super close to him. He played a big role in raising me growing up as like a child of divorce from 8 years old on. Like, when dad's got to work, grandpa comes over and does the babysitting. So like summer times, all that stuff, spent a ton of time with him. When he got um when he got sick and passed, he suffered for a while with like dementia and Alzheimer's, which was tough to watch too. But then when he finally passed, I at first had a sense of relief, and then I realized like the finality of the situation, like it was over, and I didn't know I wasn't going to get to see him again, even though the grandpa I knew was already gone because of Alzheimer's and whatnot. And then
Mhm.
from there, it's like the emotion hit me so hard, I almost blacked out. I went to his funeral. I can't remember a single detail about it. It's like gone.
Yeah.
And I wasn't that young. I was probably late teens, early 20s. I can't remember the year, but I don't remember a single moment from it because I just wasn't able to process things like, I don't want to say in a mature way, but I didn't have the experience to process that sort of loss yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think any loss of someone you're really close to or anyone just anyone hits you differently and brings up weird things that you wouldn't think it would or obvious things that it might or things that don't seem connected. I mean, I think the importance of this conversation and just, me personally reaching out to you after what happened on Thursday is because it felt like because CrossFit's such a insular, small, in a way, community, tight-knit community, I guess. It just felt it was so difficult. And, my mom passed away last year while I was on tour. I had to go home and be there at the end, which I was able to make it in time. And that's the hardest thing I've ever been through. And I think, just dealing with that, I went there's so many things to talk about that I'm having a hard time catching a thread. But I think
That's okay.
what's for me, her best friend and my stepdad were there with me, and they said, not long after, like, "Hey, your mom would want you to be touring, would want you to be playing music, like, that's what you love the most, that's what she loved the most. She was my biggest support for all
Right.
of that." And so I went back, like, I missed 2 shows, and I went right back. And it's I carried this guilt for it, like, am I not should I take the tour off? Should I what do you do in this situation? What's the right thing? What's the respectful thing? And I
When you
don't
say
think any of
carry,
that
sorry, when you say carry guilt, what is the guilt stemming from in your mind?
just going back and playing, doing this thing that I love that but I mean, I'm doing it in a way where I feel really connected to my mom. I have a picture of my mom on my drum set that I look at every time I play that I you know, talk to before we go out and all that. But yeah, just going back and doing this thing that is important to me when she's not here anymore. Like I don't know, it's almost a survivor's guilt kind of says not that necessarily, just like more of a social cultural thing. Like, is this okay to do? And that's why, the whole thing about whether the game should have happened or not, I
Right.
think is for the athletes to choose. And of course, they were probably put in a position where they couldn't give a real answer because grief is so intense that you're making decisions that maybe in hindsight, down the road, they'll look back and be like, I wish I didn't do that. Maybe some of them that didn't continue to compete will look back and wish that they did. Like, you just don't know. Like Corey says, grief works in mysterious ways, and it totally does. I mean, you have no idea how it's going to feel and when it's going to hit you. And I think for me, going back out on tour was really helpful because I was surrounded by, this band that's my family and our crew that's my family, and doing this thing that is really important to me in the way that I emote. And so it felt again like a connection with my mom every night. And it was hard the first few shows, but it almost was a great way to process it rather than just being home and having nothing and feeling like, what do I do then? Like, where does what dark corners of my brain do I go
Right.
to?
And did you spend time in those dark corners, like between shows and things like that? Like when you went back on tour immediately after the funeral, did you avoid the pain, so to speak, by like trying to throw yourself into your work as much as you could, or did you try to lean into it and feel it and process it? Like, where was your like mind at when it came to thinking about that sort of stuff?
I mean, I'm a person who I think leans into that stuff and tries to
Yeah,
embrace it as much as I can, just because it is a part of it. And for me, I think I've developed a good, I don't know, toolkit to kind of work through that stuff, as hard as it may be. And especially when I'm out with people that they would talk to me every day and check in and are you okay and hug me and like talk about it. And, Joe had lost his mom, years ago and understands all that. And I think going through this for me, I think that brought up a lot of that with him. So I think he was kind of going through it again in a way,
yeah.
which when this happened on Thursday, it took me back to that. Just like how it hit me and how personal it felt. Like it
Why do you
was a
think it?
lot,
Aside from your mother, why, like just in the recent dealing with all that, why do you think it was personal? Like, is it just a community thing? Because, both of us have invested so much time over the years into the community. And like, is it just because it was a part of the community that we know that died, or why do you think it hit you so hard? Because it hit me hard too. Like I still feel it so bad. Like what about it do you think just is sticking with us?
Yeah, all of that. I think how important CrossFit is to me and has been to my life, is one of the most important things in my life, and how much the games has been a part of that love, like following it for over a decade now. And I don't know. And then, this young man who died of preventable tragedy is just horrifying and gut wrenching, and everything surrounding it, his family being there and
Yeah,
partner being there and everything, and just kind of remember in the situation of it where like there's all these people here for this thing and now this happens, and going back to that happening on tour, and like before it happened, the guilt when she was still in the hospital, and it was like a 50-50 thing, we weren't sure. It wasn't until I booked my plane ticket, like when initially she went to the hospital, she had cancer for a number of years at the end and was in chemo. And it was obvious that it was getting bad. But she, you know, collapsed, and it was like, everything I was hearing from her best friends and the nurses that I was talking to was like, it wasn't a huge thing. Like they thought it's going to be okay. We just aren't sure how long it'll take, and so on and so forth. And then so I spent a day like, do I go home? And then everyone and myself are just like, yeah, I got to go home now. And then as soon as I get the ticket, they call me,
home to see
the
her, just to be
hospital
clear.
called home to see her. Yeah. I was
Yes.
at the airport hotel, and the hospital called and said, if you can get an earlier flight, do it,
Yeah.
because we don't know how long you have to get here. And so I switched my flight to an airport. I was flying out of DC, and then there's two airports there, so I had to go to the one that was further away. And because of that, I think only because of that, I was able to make it. Otherwise, my original flight got delayed anyway, like by hours. So I don't know if I would have made it back. Um, and everything changed very fast. And I don't know. It's all of that stuff just kind of swirled together. The importance of CrossFit to me and the games, and you know, just thinking about everyone there and how important it is to them, and this happening, and then the void you feel, and the insignificance of it all in the face of it, and you know, not what is the future, you know, what does it do to this thing we love, and who's to blame, and all that stuff, you know.
Well, yeah, and the blame game is like it's obviously part of what's going to happen, right? With information that's going to keep coming out, with what we witnessed, with all the facts and everything. But I think what you kind of said was like, and I think the point of this, like how we go forward, is, I think one, like trying to have it sounds crazy, but to try to put the incident itself, the trying to get to the bottom of it, trying to put like our job is not to be an investigator, right? We saw what happened. We know what
Yeah,
happened. We know what happened to Lazar, and that's what happened. But to try to put that aside and just try to gain control of our like emotions and feelings again as a community, and like start to process things in a more rational sense, because moving forward means big decisions are going to be made, not just from CrossFit and how they handle stuff, but like how we as individuals in a community decide to continue to represent ourselves, show up for each other, bring our best foot forward in our gyms and our affiliates. Like all these little, we can decide that an incident like this, grief like this, um, will stick with us and start to reshape who we are from the inside out, and change what we put forward. Or we can decide that, we all agree this is the worst thing that's probably ever happened in CrossFit, and we're going to use the perspective of how we feel from this to make sure that we're better to each other, we're showing up more for each other, we're just making changes, for the games, I guess, as well. Like the safety conversation is a different conversation, but like just starting to get control again. I feel like everybody is still out of control and everybody is still spiraling. And if they've picked a direction that they want to stand on, because a lot of people are kind of on one side of the fence or the other, especially with the topic, should have canceled it, shouldn't have canceled it, right? That's still a very hot topic right now. Instead of just
yeah,
understanding that there's two sides to that forever, and that your opinion is valid, but so is somebody else's, and we should just continue to kind of like be together, continue to talk about it, but not play the blame game, not pointing fingers at each other, not screaming at each other, not the names online are kind of crazy. Like just trying to continue with it, moving forward, I think is just like, I think it's the most important thing. And the sooner we get control of ourselves and have the voice of reason start to steer the ship a little bit, no pun intended, like, I don't know. I just don't want this. It's going to get ugly. It's just going to get so ugly when details of the investigation come out. Like you said, when this incident brought up your feelings about your mother and what you just went through with that, social media and information about this investigation are going to bring these feelings right back to us again about Lazar. We're going to think about him again. We're going to put
yeah,
ourselves in his shoes again, in his family's shoes again. We're going to be sick about it again, and the emotions are going to run high again. And that's going to happen like a roller coaster as we get more info about what's actually taking place. Some people are going to be super passionate, emotional if someone loses their job over it. It's the right thing, it's the wrong thing, right? You have two sides of the fence. But if people can start just like accepting reality and then trying to process it, deal with it in a way that's, like you and I sitting here taking time out of our day just to talk about it, because selfishly, this is good for you and me to talk. We just happen to be live streaming it on the internet for other people to think and listen. But selfishly, we're talking through it the same way. So like, I don't know how to help people gain control of their emotions quicker, but I think that is like the first thing that has to happen is like try to remove some of the emotion of it.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think talking about it with people in real, actual conversations is the most important thing to get through things like this. And that's the one thing I think about the games happening that I think I'm glad they happened for the community and the athletes to have that time together to talk through it and not just cancel it and go home. Whether it was right in other respects and, you know, Fannie Mae or whoever owning CrossFit or whoever, whatever financial company owns it and needs to make their bottom end or whatever, that's besides the point and obviously gross. And that being a decision making factor, you know, is a thing you can't even think about with being becoming furious. But
Right.
you know, for the community and for the athletes to have time to appreciate and you know give each other hugs and have the time together to kind of work through the grief. I think that's super important.
I I'm on your side on that. How the weekend had to play out from there though is really up for debate. Whether it had to be a competition or it could have been just a gathering, so to speak, like whatever. You could debate that forever and ever what the right thing to do with the rest of the weekend was. But I do think
Yeah. Yes.
canceling it and sending people home would have been very regretful. Let's look at a couple comments here. Sarah Cooper, if he still passed, but there was an instant effort to save him, would the fallout be as bad? What do you think?
I don't know. Probably because it would still be blamed on the fact that there was a heat advisory before, the fact that the from one, you know, video I watched of a coach that was there saying that the water temperature was like 3 degrees hotter than, you know, like the triathlon committee, safety committee or whatever decides is safe. Like all those things, you know, are going to be in people's minds that it's too much. You know,
I
I don't
think
know.
the anger.
This
I
is
think
where
the
I
anger
just
would
don't
be.
know enough.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
I think the anger would be toned down though if it looked like there was some
Oh,
massive effort to
absolutely.
save
Yes.
him. The anger, the initial, the level of like boiled over we all are to just have him go under, have an event finish, and then pull him out 40 minutes later. The thought of that
Or
is like,
3 hours later.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Long after the event was done. Yeah, like
Yeah.
the thought of that is it's unthinkable, really. So yeah, that part I think is really fueling a lot of the anger, which is a lot of the emotion, versus if there was a quick effort and he still happened. Yeah, discussion would be different to say the least.
I mean,
Um,
absolutely. It wouldn't be as like the rage wouldn't be as uncontained. It would be contained to a different thing because at least the safety protocols and the emergency personnel would have been sufficient to the event and to the task and to what
yeah.
needed to happen, which they obviously weren't.
There's another question. I'm wondering about the investigation. I have a feeling that my expectations and many people's expectations will not necessarily be what we get. We shall see. I I feel like from being a former investigator myself, I think I understand what he's saying here. Um, I think people will be it's possible that people would be unsatisfied with the result of investigation saying, "Hey, all the safety procedures were actually met. It's just unfortunate this happened." If for some reason there was some checklist that the city, CrossFit, everybody followed, it fit the insurance protocols, it fit all the procedures, and everything was to a T as far as the paperwork's concerned, and someone writes a report saying that, that will leave us really, it'll bring up that feeling of wanting somebody's head instead, because it's unsatisfying, it feels unjust even if that part is correct. So that's the danger of, like, when you call something an official investigation, a lot of people don't realize what that means. It means they're really looking through protocols, procedures, paperwork, things like that. And there's some interviews that'll be done too. And then an investigator will put together all the findings into a report, and that'll be what the investigation comes out. And a lot of times they are quite unsatisfying for people who are hurt. And so I do worry about that as well.
Oh, absolutely. Especially someone said Berkshire, I think is who, yeah, the
Yes,
managing director for Berkshire over CrossFit. Uh, Especially with like something like that as a part of this whole situation, I definitely think everyone will feel cheated and that justice will not be served because there's a lot of interests at play for the city to host the games, to all that kind of stuff that I have no idea about. But
Yeah.
and that, like you said, that's all stuff we just don't know. We don't know what the checklist is, if it's going to come out that it was done. Like, just a really specific nitpicky example is the spectator who jumped in and then the lifeguard turned him away and was like, "No, get out of the water." Like, that I can understand, because if something happens there, then it's another situation, tragic situation, because it's not their responsibility. But then nothing else happened. Like, there's no emergency divers, it seems like. But again,
Yeah.
this is all speculation. We don't actually know these things or why it happened on the timeline it did.
Yeah. And
I
we
don't know.
won't we won't until an investigation comes out, and we still might never, even when an investigation comes out. And I guess that's kind of part of the last comment, right? Is we may be quite unfulfilled when we reach the end of
Yes.
that. Um,
And I think generally it will be unfulfilling because the myriad of things that people think, like, what justice looks like, is so
right.
vastly different for everyone.
Yeah.
Like, it's never going to be the same. It's never one thing, because what the only justice is Lazar Jukic being alive and with us,
Yep.
and that will never happen. And that's,
Right.
it's horrible.
So as far as moving forward goes, because the truth about life is, at some point we're all going to go, and the people around us are going to continue to move forward. Like somebody who has just dealt with grief and tragedy in his own life, you, and went back to work and went back to tour. Like, other than being around your bandmates and friends and things like that, are there other tactics or other things you did? Is there anything you discovered about yourself along the way that helped you start healing from probably, the most, I would just imagine that's probably the most traumatic thing of your life, your mother's passing, or one of them. Um, what things did you learn about yourself, or what tactics did you kind of implore along the way to start healing?
I mean, I think the main one is being surrounded by friends. Like, when I went out to be with her at the hospital and that happened, a bunch of my friends, without telling me, just flew out to meet me, because I'm from Milwaukee and all my friends are from Milwaukee, but we all live in different places now. And a bunch of my friends came back. And that was absolutely crucial, because the first few nights were really hard. And I almost think after, like I said, my mom had been dealing with cancer for a number of years. She had breast cancer when I was younger, and that was a moment of figuring out how to deal with an event like that. Like, what happens if she's gone, and something I had nightmares about throughout my life because of that trauma, I guess. Like, I remember, to go off on a tangent, I remember being on a tour when we were in a van and trailer still, and we slept in a van because we almost ran out of gas, and so I was sleeping on the bench and just waking up, like, saying, "Mom, mom," like, like, having a nightmare about it, because it was a constant nightmare throughout my life of losing my mom, because my mom was the most important person in my life. And all that to say, at the end, her getting cancer again, and it being, initially it was a thing the doctor said, "This isn't gonna be what takes you. You're gonna get through this." It seems like all the things they were doing to, like, cut it out, it was like little spots. I don't know the ins and outs. I'm not a
Yeah.
doctor, but it seems like they were able to keep it under control until they weren't, until it
Hmm.
spread, and to a place where she had to go on chemo, and then it was just like, okay. And it was a thing I couldn't admit to myself while it was happening, and I still was in disbelief. There's a few conversations I had with my mom on the phone, or seeing her, where it really hit me, and I just had a bad feeling, but I was able to push it away. I think touring for me did have a way of deadening me to a lot of things like that because I was away from friends and family so long that I couldn't let it eat me up, you know? So I think that's almost a negative maybe because to complete the story, at the end, she was just suffering, you know, and like she was like losing weight and just obviously in pain. Uh so that the tour that it happened on was originally supposed to start in like Dallas, and then something happened that we had to switch the start to be in Chicago. And because of that, we had our rehearsals in Chicago. So I got to go home to Milwaukee like a week before and see my like have one last lunch with my mom and get to spend a bunch of time with her at their house and then she got to go to the show, and if that didn't happen, that wouldn't have happened. If we didn't
Yeah.
switch the first show to be Chicago, that wouldn't have happened. So it felt, I'm not a religious person. I don't know if I believe in God or not anymore, but that definitely, and there was moments in her actually passing that were incredibly spiritual and like beyond this world and my understanding of things rationally. But I'll keep those things to myself. But like there was something greater happening there that allowed all of those things to happen. So by the time she passed, it was almost a relief that she doesn't have to suffer anymore, like as bad as it was getting. And chemo was just it's horrible,
Yeah.
in a lot of situations. And so I think leading up to that, that was when it was the hardest. That happening, it almost again felt like a relief that my mom didn't have to suffer anymore. And then the way it's hit me, my grief has hit me, has been in these like moments that I can't foresee. Like it just happens. I'm watching something, and then I just break down, or you know,
Something that
this happened
reminds you of
last
her.
Thursday. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
And
Or it's
so,
just something weird, a song coming on that reminds me
yeah.
of her, or, whatever it is.
Your story kind of it puts two things in my head. The first, like laterally connecting you going back on tour to be with your friends, your bandmates, getting back to work, what you love to do, to me is a lot like the games athletes and even coaches and fans at the games going back to their gyms and getting back to what they normally do as a big part of starting to work through stuff versus avoiding it because I don't want to go to the gym. It makes me think of the situation. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. And then you just stay out of it and you end up letting those feelings linger a lot longer versus starting to work through them. So to me, you going back on tour is a lot like an athlete getting back in the gym or a coach going back to work or things like that, where they're surrounded by their community that they love, that's held them up for so long and will help bring them some like peace and normalcy. That's the first thing that I think of when you tell the story. The second thing, and I know you said you're going to keep some of these details to yourself, which is totally fine. But the religious side of things is something that is interesting to me with this situation, the Lazarus situation in general. There's a lot of stuff on social media about people talking about, if you have faith in Christ or believe in this God or whatever it is, that he's, in a better place, or some people just have that mindset that when somebody passes, it's just their time to go because that's the way that, God wants things, and it's not fair, but that's just the way it is. Being that you and I are, I mean, probably spiritual to a degree in different ways, but not don't necessarily follow one particular religion all the way through. Do you think it's easier for people who have that faith to work through this faster than people who may think that death is sort of more final than just like another stage of someone's being? And that's kind of deep, but like I've been thinking about the religious side of things a lot.
Yeah. I yeah, I don't know. That's a really good question. I'm sure for some people it is I don't know what the word is, a comfort, to think that. I mean, I'm not any particular religion. I'm spiritual though. I do
Yeah.
believe in something beyond and all of that. What name I'd put on it, I don't know, and I don't really care. I don't think that is the point or that's what matters. So like, when you have someone like James Sprague who's wins the games and is super religious and super Christian, I think that's great, and I think I really respect someone who has a faith that's a specific thing they believe in, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's like grief. It's just got to be different for everyone. Like I don't know that faith, even if you have it, is enough for every person, or
I'm sure
not
that
having faith is an emptiness. I don't know.
I don't either. And I'm sure there are different levels of what faith is to people, right? There are some people who, I mean, you've met people that believe every word of the Bible or whatever their gospel is the truth. And there are people who just kind of follow loosely or appreciate the morals of certain religions and follow that. So there's different levels of following. But yeah, because I've never had the experience of faith in that way. I just wonder if like somebody like me would be missing certain comforting, as you kind of said, which I think it is comforting feelings about like this is by design. This tragic thing sucks. It caught us by surprise, but unfortunately, we've accepted that it's by a greater power's design, and that is what I'll have to live with and move forward with. Like that's I don't I just think that like I don't know. I just struggle with that being like a design and not like a chance for humans to intervene or people to have free will of some kind versus that predetermined destination. I don't know. It's just a concept I struggle with.
Yeah, yeah, me too. And I mean, I don't know that.
Yeah,
I think it's more of a just what can you do but accept what has happened? I
right.
mean, whether you say it's predestination that God took my mom because it was her time or whatever, that's doesn't matter if that's what you think, or if I'm just accepting that that's what happened and there's nothing I can do to change that. I think it's
Yeah.
still ultimately the same thing, and what we need to do is accept it and work through the grief. And one thing, I did have a book called like the Grief Handbook, I think, that a friend gave to me
Oh,
when it
really?
happened. Um, Let me make sure that's the name of the book.
And you read through it?
The Grief, yeah. I read some of it. I don't remember. Yeah, the Grief Recovery Handbook by John W. James and Russell Friedman. Um, I don't remember anything specifically I took from it because I think, thinking back to that time, it was kind of a fog and a
Yeah.
thing I can't really. There's no like talking about it's tough because it's so time was meaningless. Like
Yep.
I remember things in with no order or linear progression.
Well, not to keep circling around to this topic, but I do feel strongly like you're right. So when you're in the middle of something that's really challenging, things start to blend together. You feel foggy in the brain. Recalling times and days becomes very, very challenging because you're so ultra focused on the pain or the memory or all these things. And so again, knowing that that's part of the situation, that is a small detail that does make me thankful that some part of that weekend continued on, because without continuing, without the additional memories and experiences and chances for the community to bond, that time will be a crazy fog a few years from now if you didn't have that, right? Just knowing that you showed up somewhere or you watched a live stream, you know, Lazar had that incident and that would be it. And instead, like people are going to have, like you and I are having this conversation now because of that. And like that'll make our future
Yeah,
conversation sharper. People are listening. Other people are having conversations all over the internet, in person, whatever. And this right here is what's bringing people together. The conversations on social media where you're just shouting at each other, not helpful. But like This is a moment
Yeah.
where we're
But
yeah,
also but also I understand it. I understand the rage people feel on
it's
whatever
fine.
side of it they feel, whether it should have happened
Totally.
or shouldn't have. I mean, I don't think it's helpful. I think it is a really toxic thing that drives people crazier, but I get it. I totally understand it. I think it's okay that people feel that way. I mean, and I think for this, I totally agree with exactly what you're saying. I think the main thing is this has nothing to do with whether I think it should or should not have happened, but it did happen. So I think what we can take from it happening is the fact that the community and the athletes and everyone had that time to process together.
Yeah. Yep.
Wanna Love says, "I don't understand the rage at all." And I mean, I just think losing someone in preventable circumstances is an enraging thing to happen. So, like, I don't personally understand taking it to social media comments where it's all meaningless and it isn't doing anything but further, you know, creating a tornado of toxicness. But yeah, I don't know. I understand it.
Well, yeah, I think I guess I hadn't I mean, I thought of it, but I just like the way that you put it. Like, no matter what we think or no matter what we wanted to happen, like the situation happened. Like acceptance is part of this situation. Like I know there's like a step program, right? Like acceptance is somewhere in this, that I'm accepting that this is the reality that now exists and that we're moving through. And so trying to use your energy to be resourceful for others and there for others and available for others is like much better than using your energy to tell somebody how wrong they are or how stupid they are or whatever. I mean, way worse shit people are saying on the internet than that. But yeah, man, I don't know. I just I'm just working through it like everybody else, and like no, there is no, in my mind, honestly, there is no justice that's going to come from this. Even if, they decided to fire everyone from the top of CrossFit down the food chain to the last volunteer and clean house, like that doesn't make me feel better. Even if they change certain parameters of the games, do this, do that, it doesn't make me feel better. Am I happy that, or not happy? Do I hope that positive outcomes come from this situation, like in any way, shape, or form they can, whether it's relationships or other whatever? Yes, but I'm just okay with the fact that anything that happens will never it won't bring it back. It won't make it right, but we have to work with what we have to do the best that we can moving forward, sort of thing. And like that should, all those efforts should be some sort of positive outlet. I don't know what that looks like, and I don't know who does, but um, that's
Yeah,
interesting. Life is a series of losses, but losses breed lessons, and lessons create blessings. Nice little
I
quote.
think that's
And
great.
yeah, as long as people follow through with being good people to each other,
Yeah,
is an interesting
I
comment.
agree.
There's a group in CrossFit that's been spewing hate for Dave Castro for a decade on various forums. It's their day, and they're not holding back. That sucks. That's that's literally all I have to say about
Yeah,
that. Whether you can start to put your thumb on him as part of what happened. Sure, I don't know. I don't know how to. Again, I'm not trying to finger point. I'm just trying to accept what's happening, and that sucks. That's what people are using their energy for. We'll wrap this up in
yeah,
a minute. I think people want to believe it was
yeah,
preventable, so they feel a need for blame. I What I've seen, I don't know if it was preventable. It may have well been. I don't know that for a fact. I can't speak factually about this, but all I do know is that from the optics, my optics, it did not look like they made a good effort. It did not look like they
yes.
made a real effort to save him. I don't know any other detail than that I can speak on. From my
And
point
I
of
think
view,
that
yeah.
yeah, and I think that's the important thing to say is we have no idea whether it was or wasn't just from the optics, like, because we don't know the safety protocols and all the things. So I saw another comment that was like, they looked at the requirements for swimming in lagoons, and it looked like they didn't meet the requirements, but we just don't know for sure if that's the case or not. I mean, it
Yeah.
certainly looks like it. It certainly looks like it could have been preventable, emergency divers, things of that nature that didn't seem to be there, but I don't know for sure if they were or weren't.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah. Okay. We've everyone's gone through this whole thing a million times. I think
yes, of
the
course.
basic I think the basic reason that Andy and I decided just to chat today is just to remind people to like try to keep talking about this stuff, try to work through it, try not to just be like slinging mud at each other. Just find your outlet. I mean, CrossFit on its own in your gym, put the CrossFit Games aside. You use CrossFit as the outlet for your everyday motions, health and fitness. Like it is one of the centers of your life. There's a big reason you dedicate an hour plus to your gym 5+ days a week. There's a reason you've done it for 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. There's a reason. Those reasons don't stop because this terrible thing happened. And the people in there are still the same people in there. So, and a lot of those people are the same people on the internet. They're just all hurting in different ways. So keeping that shit in mind and just being able to talk with each other and realizing, yeah, change is coming. We don't know what that's going to look like, but like continue to have the conversations, just keep talking to people and in a respectful way. And if someone disagrees with you, like that's okay. Civil discourse. I love
Yeah,
disagreeing with Andy on things. It's my
yeah,
favorite.
I do too. But I mean, I guess the one thing to wrap up on my end is that,
Yeah.
to echo what you were saying just a minute ago, is that the only justice that needs to happen or it will be a failure is if positive changes and positive outcomes don't come from this. If it were like, we did everything that we were supposed to do from a safety standpoint, so that's it. Like,
Yeah.
and I don't think that happens, but I just think, seeing the Buttery Bros thing and the Pat Vellner comment of, bringing up safety concerns for years, it's got to be transparent and it's got to be a focus. What do the athletes think needs to change? And like, they have to take steps to implement those changes that obviously have needed to happen.
Yeah. And even
Like,
I'll take it
and
one step further. Yeah, go ahead. Go.
oh, does there need to be like an athletes union or something? I think there is the PFAA or something, but like that needs to be more of a voice or something else similar to that, like a safety commission, uh, just to make sure this stuff happens. Yeah,
Yeah.
you go.
No, yeah, yeah, a lot of people are talking about that. I think that's going to be a no brainer that they're going to have third party people in the mix now. Just checks and balances a little bit. Yeah, just again, I totally agree that some positive change has to be, and I think people should just look inward because it all starts with each of us. So, like looking inward on that change, not only changes to the surface level CrossFit Games and all that stuff, but like as people, we just have been witnessing horrific incident to, like you called it, like a toxic tornado of like whatever on the internet. Like take a second, look at yourself. Have you been doing everything that you can do to represent yourself and help other people in the best way you can during this incident? If not, it starts with you. And so I'm just as guilty. I react emotional like
Oh,
everybody else. Like we're all just as guilty, but like this is the perspective. These are the moments in time that we don't get that often that we need to force ourselves to look inward and make change because we can, yeah. I mean, the people's true colors come out real quick in situations like this, and it's never too late to improve that. So,
yes.
okay. Yep. I think we've said enough for today. Thank you so much for coming on short notice and just having this chat with me. It's again,
Yeah, of
even if
course.
zero people watch this, I would have liked to done this anyway and just talk through it and continue to feel better about this. I just, yeah, we'll leave it at that. But okay, guys, thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate your questions and feedback on all this. this is the episode I needed to be able to get me back into some normalcy with doing shows, posting on my own channel. So I will start doing some stuff this week, next week, whatever. So hope to see you then.
Thank you.